Right, so the second part of the day was talking about caterpillar tunnels. So we had Jamie Carr here from Blacklands Organics telling us how he uses the caterpillar tunnel. He hasn't got one quite this long. This is 50 meters long, and if you look at the sides here, this is the concise version, which basically means that it comes out by 2 meters as opposed to nearly 4 meters, because I wanted to be able to get past here with a tractor or with a quad bike, whatever. So this is a 50 meter one. I think Jamie has a 40 or a 30 meter one. And what he was talking us through is how he uses it in his field scale operations. So he's got quite a few polytunnels, and he's adding to that using caterpillar tunnels. And he'd actually just ploughed his ground to plant tomatoes, which was interesting. That's kind of a new one on me. So that he would then prepare the ground with a tractor and then put the caterpillar tunnel over top and then plant his tomatoes. The way that these things are put together is that these hoops here, I think there's 35 hoops, they sit on a rebar. So this is the rebar, and you pound that into the ground halfway, and then you slip this little kink bit of metal there with a carabiner on there, and then the hoops over there, they just go directly on top of the on top of the rebar. A quick tip is that if you're putting the carabiner on that, make sure the clip is on the outside. If it's the other way, it makes putting the rope on really quite difficult. It means that it's sort of facing into the caterpillar tunnel. So if it's like that, it's facing into the caterpillar tunnel, much more difficult to get the rope on. So that's one of my top tips. The other top tip is to, you'll find that all of the cord comes in a big bundle. I would absolutely recommend straight away putting it onto a reel. The first one we put up, we spent the best part of a day unraveling it. So get it straight onto a reel, makes it so much quicker to manage. And then what I do is I have this little bit of wood, which is just an old broken rake handle, and I bang those in. I don't have time to bang those in. And then I put the reel on here. So when we're actually putting the, obviously I get the angles right, but when we're putting it up, I just leave it here and I pull it from the caterpillar tunnel so that we're putting the cord on. But when we're taking it down, we have a third person. So we've got one person either side undoing the clips. We have a third person just winding it in on as we go along. So it just makes it so much easier and less frustrating if you put it straight into a reel. And I would say that in terms of us putting the caterpillar tunnel up, it took us about 3 hours to completely take it down. So taking the cover off is quick. Actually taking the cord off is fairly quick too. And then it took a little while just to undo the bolts, because in the 50 meter long version you get there's a top spine, rigid poles at the top. It's not just the webbing. And it took us 3 hours to completely take it down and to erect all of the hoops in the other location. Now that's vastly sped up if you've got a spare set of rebar. So if you've got double the amount of rebar you need, you can actually put them in the location that they're going to go to eventually, so that when you're moving the hoops, you can move them hoop by hoop and put them straight to sit in situ. If you've got to take the whole thing down, recover the rebar, and then move the hoops, it just sort of extends out the time a lot more. The longest bit actually of the erection of them is putting on the rope. And so what you do is you tie it off on the pole and then you thread it through, and I put on a carabiner something that's not going to damage the cover, like a a reel of polytunnel repair tape, for example, I tie it to the carabiner, clip it onto the rope and just fling it over, and the person over there will then put it in that carabiner clip, and you skip a hoop. So I'm going from here, skipping a hoop, to here, whereas the other person on the other side will be doing this hoop on that side. So you're basically going every other, in a zigzag motion, every other hoop. And then when you get to the end, you reverse it. So then it comes back and you're actually covering every single hoop. And then the final step is you just alternate on either side and give it a tug to tighten it up. And you just tighten up every other one, and then again come back every other one to tighten it up, and then you'll actually end up with a good sort of 30 meters of spare cord at the end after you've tightened it up. We've had good success in keeping it up all winter. We've not had any problem. We are, I guess, relatively sheltered here, but I know that Jamie said that he actually lost a few tunnels on his site, but didn't lose the caterpillar tunnel. So I have heard some people, who have had bent hoops when the wind pressure has just been a bit too much. But that hasn't happened to us, and it hasn't happened to Jamie either. And so what we've got in here is the courgettes. These were planted actually on the day of the workshop. So a couple days ago, last Tuesday, and we actually have double cloches here because we did have a -2 that night. So we put a cloche on, and then we put a tub on just to keep them going. But actually now it's warm enough. I think we're not really going to have weather that's going to be affecting the courgettes in the tunnel. But the nice thing about this is that the courgettes really don't like the hot polytunnels when it gets too hot. They also get too big, so space is an issue in the polytunnels. And so with a caterpillar tunnel, we can get them going up when they're vulnerable to the cold nights, get them up to a nice size and hopefully be fruiting quite soon, and then move the whole tunnel, and the whole tunnel will then be aubergines in the summer. So basically you're getting multiple uses of the polytunnels, getting more than one crop in a season. Now obviously I am doing this in a no-dig environment. We did have a discussion about no-dig and weed management and green manures, and Jane from Oxton Organics was here and inputted on that as well. But we are still using tarps to terminate some of the weeds, but it's something that we're definitely looking at to use green manures as a way of suppressing weeds and to maintain soil fertility. But that's something that we have yet to report on. Just the top tip here, the tarp has the EnviroMesh on top for no other reason than the EnviroMesh is permeable, air permeable, so that means that the wind doesn't catch it and blow the tarp away, so it doesn't create like a Bernoulli effect by raising up the tarp and flinging it down the field. So having this permeable layer on top of the tarp just means that it doesn't blow away in the winds. What else were we saying? We talked about overhead or irrigation. So I've got drip tapes in here, and I think the consensus with people who have caterpillar tunnels is that to have an overhead watering option is advisable. We don't have it, and I guess the team here kind of wish that I had got an overhead irrigation kit for the cat tunnels. So as to remediate that, I bought some sprinklers on stands that I'll put up and down the polytunnel for to behave like overhead watering. We do have Mypex in here in the courgettes, and that's so that we can start to maintain or control the weeds within between the courgettes. It's an opportunity once every 5 years. It's a 5-year rotation here to really get on top of some of the perennial weeds. So that Mypex will be down for the whole of summer, excluding all the weeds in the paths and right up to the plant. So it's a good chance to get on top of the weeds. But obviously I'd rather do away with the Mypex, but it's still very much part of our system. Last year we grew tomatoes in the cat tunnel. So in the polytunnel it's much taller, and we had cherry tomatoes in there. And the reason why that was better for us is that by the time we were dropping down the vines, the tomato vines, the bottom truss wasn't quite ripe yet. So when we were lowering it, it was touching the ground. So we really needed the height in the polytunnel for the cherry tomatoes. However, for the caterpillar tunnel, it's perfect for beef tomatoes. We had 4 types of beef tomato. We had purple calabash, purple Cherokee, Costoluto de Fiorentino, and I can't remember the other one, but there was another one too. So we got around about 600 kilos of beef tomatoes from the tunnel last summer, and we were trying all sorts of experiments in there. We had aubergine peppers, so that wasn't really full of tomatoes. I think this year that we're kind of aiming for about a ton of beef tomatoes and salad tomatoes from the cat tunnel. So I'm hoping for a big increase in production. If you are doing anything that climbs, whether it's tomatoes or beans or anything in the caterpillar tunnel, I would definitely recommend using or getting the crop tunnel or the crop bars with the cat tunnel. It costs a little bit extra, but it's really good to have that there in the tunnel. We actually train wires all the way along the crop bars inside, so that we then hang the strings. In fact, we use the clipper system. Some people use tunnel hooks, but we use the clipper system to hang tomatoes from the wires hanging on the crop bars. So definitely use those. Definitely get the crop bars. The other thing is that because I wanted the caterpillar tunnel to fully last through the winter, and to give it some ground strength, or so it doesn't lift up, we've actually got 5 sets of ground screws, 1 at either end and 3 along the middle, where that's actually a big spike drilled all the way into the ground. So that's really not going to move anywhere. So we wanted to keep it up all year round, and to give it its strength, or tying it to the ground. Those ground screws help a lot. When we're putting down the obviously this is raised up at the moment. Use these little clips to hold the cover up so that it gets ventilation. It's got that the wrong way around. Just clips like that, so it's on the inside when it's down, and then when you lift it up you can put it on the outside. The really nice thing about the caterpillar tunnels is that they're really easy to vent, because you've got ventilation all the way along the side. The temperature really never skyrockets like it does in the polytunnels. So I don't think we ever got much beyond sort of 35, maybe 40 degrees last year in here, whereas in the polytunnels, when it was really hot, it would easily get up to 50 degrees. And we were talking about at the time on the day that if you are not comfortable sitting in a polytunnel with the heat, then probably your plants aren't either. So you really have to keep it ventilated, keep the temperature down, in order for those plants not to be stressed. And there was definitely a discussion about how that heat stress can actually invite spider mites, so you get infestations of spider mite if the plants get too stressed through heat. So getting the temperature out of the tunnels is useful. I know that Jamie, on some of his other tunnels, he's created vents, actually cut holes in his polytunnels with vents that open up, so he gets an awful lot of heat out of his static tunnels that way. But certainly the cat tunnels are much easier to keep the heat out of. The only real downside is it's a bit of a pain to get in. So I've got this up quite high, it's quite easy, but you are accessing it from the side, and you're likely over the season to kind of ruin this part of the of the next bed, of the next no-dig bed. So that's a little irritating. You obviously have to leave a little bit of a gap between the tomatoes so you can get in there. But yeah, so access is a little bit more tricky. But I think it's definitely a good part of the mix to have static palm tunnels as well as caterpillar tunnels as well. Right. So other uses for us is that we are currently overwintering our last year's spinach and chard in a tunnel. So we put a caterpillar tunnel on there so that the pigeons don't eat it. And we can try and get a spring flush of those crops before everything else is ready in the middle of the hungry gap. But we also did have a discussion about, particularly in the field scale, where you could literally direct drill salads in the autumn before you need a polytunnel to get them going, while the cat tunnel still has things in it that you don't want to take out yet. So you can actually get things going in an open environment in the beds, so that when you are finally finished with the cat tunnel, be it tomatoes or aubergines or whatever, then you can move it out over onto your salad crops or whatever it is that you've direct drilled, so that you're actually you haven't got it in sequence. You don't have to finish one crop to start the other crop. You can actually have them overlapping quite a bit. It gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of when you plant and when you want to cover it. Yes, so yeah, we've got spinach and chard, and then that's going to become tomatoes. And this one is going to start off with courgettes, and then we're going to move the whole tunnel to have aubergines and peppers for the whole of the summer. So that's how we're going to do it. One thing that I forgot to mention is just weighing down the cover. You can see if we walk up here, if you can get the cover to go down and then up, so you've got a nice little bucket of water. When it rains, you get an awful lot of water stuck in there, and you can also put sandbags in there to kind of create the pouch a bit better, the pocket for water, and that will hold down the cover a lot. So there'll be a lot of weight in that water. So if you have got a storm coming, just go up and make sure that lip is up. The water will naturally just collect in that pocket and really hold down the cover if the wind gets up. So hopefully that summarizes most things that we talked through on the day with cat tunnels. One thing that we did say is that someone had a question about whether you would use the hoops for other purposes, so take off the cover, or have multiple sets of hoops in one cover. I don't think that was necessarily a good idea. I think you kind of want the whole tunnel together, because the hoops are really the most expensive bit. But we do have some spare hoops from a tunnel that we're taking down, and we're going to put them up in the market garden, much like this, on rebar. But instead of having a crop cover, a polytunnel, polythene cover, we'll have bird netting, so that we can keep the pigeons off of our lettuce. We've had a lot of problems in the last couple of years, especially, of pigeons really attacking our lettuce, and so having an environment that is essentially outside but bird proof is something that we are looking at, and I know that other people in the group were also looking at that too. So we'll basically repurpose old polytunnel hoops, have them much wider spaced so that you don't need so many hoops, and then just drape bird netting over the top to keep the birds out. Talking of birds, we did actually have a lot of birds getting into our tomato tunnel and pecking at the tomatoes in the season. And so what we ended up doing is putting a rabbit netting up to here, 1 meter rabbit netting, and then lowering the cover to the rabbit netting. So we had all the ventilation, but no birds could come in. And just where the doors were, we would wrap over this section of hoop. We would just wrap bird netting right over the top, so that we just pull the bird netting and then walk through. So that as soon as we put up the rabbit netting around the tunnel and had the bird netting where we get in and out, then the birds left our tomatoes alone. So that was a good learning from last year. Yeah, so I think I've covered all the things that we talked about. Yeah, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, it was a good session on the day. Enjoyed it, lots of questions, fantastic. Great for the Organic Growers Alliance to help us and organise it for us. See you later.